In 1990, a couple from Nigeria, a couple named Charles and Veronica Adetokunbo, were blessed with a child named Francis. Due to bad finances, they had to leave the city of Lagos to find a better life in Turkey. This couple had to sacrifice to be separated from their baby. As illegal immigrants, they couldn't settle living in that country, so they had to move to Greece. In Greece, they started to earn a living, even though it was not that much of a difference from the life of low-class residents. When Veronica gave birth to their third child, they began to think about getting legal status as residents. Unfortunately, immigration couldn't process their request due to them losing their passport. Since then, they stayed as illegal immigrants. In 2004, when they had a total of 5 children, Veronica taught them to be able to survive on the streets, selling various types of souvenirs. From time to time, every time they had to run away from the immigration police. This family was still happy because after all, they could live out of misery in that country and fulfill their daily needs. No matter how much they got each day, they were always grateful for it, even though Veronica had to be creative to manage the expenses. They even managed to buy a soccer ball for the children. Like most people in Nigeria who idolized J.J. Okocha, Charles also tried to make his sons love football. Besides, he always taught the mentality to stick together and sacrifice for the sake of the family. When one person in the family scores, the whole family score. Since all of the boys were born in Greece, they were also named after the local names, namely Thanasis, Giannis, Kostas, and Alexandros. In 2007, Thanasis and Giannis had grown up. At that time, Charles still liked to take his children to play soccer. Besides the mini soccer field where they usually played, there is a basketball court. One day, Thanasis and Giannis were curious about the basketball game. They tried to join the other kids who played there, and since they had tall figures, the other kids invited them to play. At that time, these two still didn't understand the rules of basketball. Giannis and Thanasis were still trying to get used to the game rules, but over time, they started to understand the flow of the game. The other kids then invited Thanasis and Giannis to join them to play at the court owned by Philathlytikos, one of the basketball teams in Greece. There, they would be given free training sessions. Throughout history, there have only been a handful of Africans who have succeeded in becoming basketball athletes. The first is Sophocles Skortsinitis, a Cameroonian who is now a resident of Greece, and the second is Hakeem Olajuwon, the legend of the Houston Rockets who won the NBA twice. Coincidentally, Olajuwon was a Nigerian, just like Thanasis and Giannis. This sparked the spirit inside of them to be better at basketball. The problem was, they needed about an hour and a half to reach the Philathlytikos court. Both of them were afraid of being caught by their father if they went too far. Their status as illegal immigrants made them have to be careful when traveling. However, they were desperate to leave for the sake of their future. Thanasis and Giannis went to the court by taking the metro bus. In the middle of the trip, the bus met a group of rioters who refused the presence of the immigrants. When the rioters saw both of them on the bus, they immediately committed blasphemy. The raids were getting louder and fiercer. Fortunately, they were able to escape the danger. They arrived at their destination safely. They entered the court and saw some kids practicing basketball. Mr. Takis, the coach, saw their arrival. He felt a little strange, but because of their tall figures, both Thanasis and Giannis were allowed to practice. Mr. Takis reminded them to bring a letter of permission from their parents to the next session. In the practice session, Mr. Takis taught them how to do mid-range shoots. Thanasis, whose bodies are more flexible, made it easier to do it, unlike Giannis, whose body was still really stiff. However, he still wanted to try. When they were about to go home, they are provided with a basketball and a parent's permission letter by the coach. The two were eagerly asking for their mother to sign the form, but when their parents found out that they had ventured far from home, they were scolded. Charles was afraid that the team would report them both to immigration. So instead of signing the form, Thanasis and Giannis were punished. Luckily, their mother, who looked at their sincerity, tried to convince her husband to sign the form. Charles finally agreed to sign the form. The next day, Thanasis and Giannis came back to the training ground. This time, they were taught about dribbling and keeping the ball. Thanasis aced the practice and could easily follow the instruction from the coach, while Giannis struggled to get used to it. Good thing he still wanted to try. He had made up his mind to keep practicing. Likewise, when the coach introduced them to fast break, the team had to be able to convert from defense to offense in just 8 seconds. Despite acing rebounds, he was slow in making decisions. Thanasis never stopped encouraging his brother. On the other hand, after some time, Veronica was still in contact with Francis in Nigeria. She promised that one day, they would be reunited as a whole family. The family still strived for their lives as illegal immigrants. Charles with his job as a laborer, Veronica as a caretaker for old people in a nursing house, and their two sons as rookie basketball with a mission to raise their family's dignity. Thanasis got even better as time flew, making Giannis amazed by his brother's performance. One day, Charles visited the training ground to talk with Mr. Takis. The coach felt that Thanasis was ready to play in the Greek League. Coincidentally, several teams had already expressed their interest. He also felt that Thanasis had the chance to enter the Greek national team. Hearing this, Charles felt happy and worried at the same time. He worried that if one of his children rises to the surface, it was not impossible that their existence as illegal immigrants would begin to be exposed. However, because of the pressure, Charles finally accepted Panarios' proposal because the Greek Sea Basketball League team intended to recruit Thanasis. Thanasis had even given a check as a sign of signing. The family was very happy to get the good news, because like the principle that Charles always said, when one person in the family scores, the whole family score. To celebrate it, they went together to the city to have a little fun. They decided to buy 2 basketball shoes for Thanasis and Giannis since both of them needed a pair for each. Unfortunately, when they tried to cash the check, it turned out that the check has been cancelled. It turned out that Panarios had found out about Thanasis' family, who was an illegal immigrant. They didn't want to take the risk and got punished by the Federation for recruiting illegal immigrants. Therefore, they withdrew their interest in Thanasis. He was heartbroken. This time, it's Giannis' turn to provide support. He was increasingly determined to prove himself to the world in the name of his family's honor. Because of that, Giannis trained himself even harder. He tirelessly practiced jump shots, dribbling, rebounding, anything. Seeing his son doing his best, Charles was touched and determined to make his children's dreams come true. As a former football player, he knew what it meant to fulfill a dream. So, one day, he came with a surprise. Charles didn't want to be half-hearted. He gave each of his children the Nike Air Force One shoes, which were widely used by basketball players. He also felt that his children had tried their best, so they deserved the prize. Thanasis and Giannis didn't wait until tomorrow to put on their new shoes. That night, when it was raining, both of them practiced. Despite getting wet, they had a one-on-one match. Thanasis against Giannis. For the umpteenth time, Charles tried to apply for a legal residence, and for the same amount of time, he was refused. He looked annoyed. He reasoned that since now his status had become a permanent employee, he deserved permanent residency. The staff from immigration bluntly told him that seeing the current state of the country, there was little to no chance for him to receive permanent residency. The trial match was then carried out and Giannis started to get chances to play. Even though he had developed his skills, Giannis was still not good during the matches. The coach was often angry because of the mistakes he made. Therefore, Giannis continued to push himself to be at the highest level. He filled himself with Magic Johnson's clip playing basketball every day. He never gave up to be the best. Later in 2011, this kid had become a decent basketball player. His jump shots had started getting better. In the team, he was constantly played, and his combination with the Thanasis made his team respected by the other teams. One day, 2 scouts came to review the talents of new players. One of them recommended Giannis and Thanasis. At that time, both were playing well. In the final minutes of the match, Thanasis suffered an injury due to a sprained ankle. He was forced to be substituted to the bench. Thanasis handed the leader position to his brother. That was when Giannis showed his mentality as a leader for his team. He made some assists and scored many points. At the same time, he also showed his defensive skills and made his team win the match. After the match, the 2 scouts were still arguing about Thanasis and Giannis, but Paco did not want to consider both Thanasis and Giannis. One of them, named Haris Eleftheria, then introduced himself to Charles. He said that he was interested in becoming an agent for his 2 children. When asked about Paco, he said that they were not partners, but that person was indeed the most influential scout in the Greek League. Charles then conveyed this to his sons. Giannis happily accepted Haris's offer. Haris promised to work as hard as possible to skyrocket Giannis's name in the league. Sometime later, Haris came to Giannis's house. He reported that he had contacted the Greek team and as Paco had said, no team would accept illegal immigrant players. Therefore, Haris would make it to the international level through the FIBA regional tryout. FIBA is an international basketball federation. Usually, scouts from all over Europe teams will attend the event. If Giannis was successfully recruited, his family status would gain more and more attention, but this time, Charles prepared himself. If they wanted to hit the jackpot, they had to be willing to face the risk. From then on, Giannis's role was to bring his family into a better life. Realizing his position, he trained even harder. Sometimes, Giannis would stay on the basketball court overnight to do his own practice session. It's time for the FIBA regional tryout. Giannis played with several other players who were put together into a team and played against each other. All of the family came to support him, especially both of his parents. They were anxious during the match, especially Charles. He was so anxious, he decided to leave the court and went outside. The match itself was still going on and Giannis was still trying hard to get into his best performance until finally, sometime later, the Thanasis came calling his father. He gave the news that Giannis performed flawlessly. He dominated the match. Charles then went back into the court and congratulated his son. At the same time, Horace was busy carrying out his duties. He then came with good news. Basket Zaragoza, a Spanish team, was ready to sign Giannis. The Greek teams were still worried about the status of residency of their players, but the Spanish teams, which were more maintained, were ready to take risks. They were ready to prepare a visa for Giannis and are willing to give a down payment of 10% of the contract money, but Giannis didn't want to leave his family. He asked if he could bring his family with him to Zaragoza. Harris returned to renegotiate. When they anxiously waited for Horace to come, surprisingly, Paco came to their house. After hearing about the signing contract from Basket Zaragoza, Paco told Giannis that the Greek basketball teams had changed their mind. He gave free money of €5,000 to invite Giannis to just come to his office. Paco said that he had received some offers from Greek teams who were brave enough to recruit Giannis and willed to provide permanent residence visas for all members of the family. Paco told them to forget Harris. For a moment, they were tempted by the offers, but they finally decided to discuss it first. Charles was more tempted by the offer from the Greek teams. Because if Giannis accepted the offer to play for Greece teams, they would be guaranteed to stay together, but Giannis felt bad if they had to leave Horace. Veronica also felt the same. It is wrong if they forgot the people who have worked hard for their sake. When they got out of the kitchen, Charles confidently handed over the money to Paco. Rejected, Paco was disappointed and angry. While walking towards his car, he threatened to report them to the immigration authorities. Not long after, Harris came. He came with big news. He informed them that Zaragoza did not guarantee that they would take care of the Adetokunbo family visa. But on the bright side, Horace had included Giannis in the draft list for the NBA. Horace had sent Giannis's profile video to a fellow agent in America. They were interested in Giannis and immediately included him in the NBA draft list that year. In Giannis's contract with Zaragoza, Horace also included a release clause that if there is an NBA team that was interested in recruiting him, Giannis can immediately go to America without having to play in the Spanish league. The NBA team would certainly guarantee the player's family's finances and provides in America. Although it was not without risk. If he was not selected for the NBA draft, Giannis had to return to Spain on his own, and his family in Greece would likely be exposed. After going back and forth to take care of the visa to go to America, finally, they managed to get it.
You must know how difficult it is. All we need is a temporary visa.
Adetokunbo was written in Greek spelling in the visa and changed to Antetokounmpo, as people know it today. Giannis, accompanied by Thanasis and Horace, then departed for the airport, preparing to fly to New York City with a big mission to be selected for the NBA draft and to unite their family in the new country with Francis. When they arrived later, they were welcomed by Kevin Stefanides, an agent from America who is also Harris's colleague. Visiting the big metropolis was a new experience for Giannis and Thanasis, especially if Giannis ended up being contracted by an NBA team. Their plan the next day was to prepare a strategy for the draft and to meet representatives from the Nike shoe company in the evening. Giannis did not believe that Nike they were talking about was the company whose shoes he proudly wore. In the meeting, they would talk about the possibility that Giannis would get an endorsement from the company. NBA Draft Day was always at the center of attention for every basketball fan in America. In that event, they would be able to witness where the wonder kids who have played brilliantly in the university leagues and international teams would start their pro careers in the NBA. Horace and Kevin himself planned for Giannis to be between number 12 to 15. There were the Philadelphia 76ers, Utah Jazz, New Orleans Pelicans, and Milwaukee Bucks. In the evening, they met the representative of Nike. There, the representative asked Giannis to explain his selling points compared to other players. Giannis, who felt that he did not have any selling points compared to the other players, then told them about his background and family. He told them that he was an immigrant that lived on the brink of poverty. He didn't even have shoes and often borrowed his brother's. He often stayed overnight on the court to catch up on the morning training session and so on. Everything was based on integrity, the struggle for life, and loyalty. The Nike representative was touched to hear this story from Giannis. She later informed them that she would deliver the news after the draft day was finished. The NBA draft day arrived. In a neat suit, Giannis entered the room and tried to smile at everyone. The 76ers saw Giannis's potential, but what they were looking for were ready-made players, as well as Oklahoma City Thunder and Utah Jazz. They judged that Giannis was still not ready for the big game. A longer conversation took place with John Hammond, GM of Milwaukee Bucks. He did an interview to find out how far Giannis's mindset was in terms of the game. It seemed that John Hammond was indeed interested, but he also spoke openly that Giannis still needed more time to train his form to be able to penetrate the enemy's defense, as well as the issue of residency status, which he said was very risky. At that time, he couldn't give much promise. Therefore, when David Stern stepped up to the podium and announced the draft, that moment became the most thrilling moment for them, especially for Giannis. Because for him, this was not only the start of his career but also a matter of survival for his family. The first player who was drafted for the NBA was Anthony Bennett, a Canadian player whose career did not go smoothly in the NBA. The second was Victor Oladipo, whose career was better than Bennett's. He had made it to the NBA All-Star several times. Oladipo was also of Nigerian descent. Many names had been mentioned up to the 14th place, but Giannis's name had not been yet called. Everyone was nervous, especially the family in Greece, who also witnessed the event. The last team was Milwaukee Bucks. Neither Horace nor Kevin hadn't received any contact from them, but just like destiny, Giannis's name was drafted in 15th place to join the Milwaukee Bucks, the team which he would later bring to the NBA Elite League. In this team, he developed into one of the best players in the NBA. He managed to bring, but most importantly, his success managed to unite all his family, including his oldest brother, Francis, in America.